Howdy. I'm going to show you the virtual learning environment that I've concocted together that I'm going to use to teach computer science in the DP, in the IB-DP curriculum. So basically, it's a kind of a workflow that I have that will enable me to teach my students how to program and also some topics in computer science. And this is example Python code. What I'm using now is called Jupyter Notebooks. And this is a very cool tool that lets me input various code into these cells like this. And then I can, building on top of it, I can generate a sequence of code that produces a desired result. And the student can see it for themselves. They can play with it, they can change it, and they can rerun it. And so it's a really cool tool. And not only that, but it also has a lot of visualization like features. And one of those is the ability to use something called Markdown to highlight and make text in HTML basically. So with a combination of that, I think it's a really great tool to use for like kind of a class that's content heavy. And so that's Jupyter Notebook. But what I needed more stuff than this, and I wanted to mod it to make it work for my particular needs, which I'll show you in a second. But first, I want to give you an example of a really tricked out notebook, what they look like in the end. So using those features I've just showed you, this is a kind of a Python tutorial. And it's just teaching, control and flow. It looks really nice. You can have all kinds of, syntax highlighting and all sorts of things like that. So very, very useful. Jupyter Notebook is actually quite popular for that reason, and for lectures and for data scientists as well. So let me discuss what I needed this thing to do, how to work differently, and then how I solved it, and show you the example. So what I wanted to do is I didn't want it to build. You see how these cells are building? Like I have A is 10 at first, and then later I rerun it here, and it changed from 21 to 11. So I don't like that as for beginners, teenager beginners. I think it's just a really confusing. I still get thrown off by the sequence of these things. Like you can literally like start here, print A here, change this to A, and it will print, why is that 10 and not 11, right? I mean, well, I know why, but like it doesn't really flow well, and it's easy to get mixed up. So what I wanted each cell to be standalone. I didn't want it to build on each other. I didn't want the values here to remain in this cell. So that was one thing. But another thing I needed is that in terms of the curriculum, I needed a way to write different. I needed a way to write pseudocode. So Python code is like this. This is just a for loop, and I run it, and it's okay. But this is I needed it to do pseudocode. So in pseudocode, the same thing looks like this. And it will do the same thing, but that doesn't work in this because it only understands Python, and this is not Python. This is pseudocode, but it's really similar to Python. It's possible to transpile it into Python and run it, but not by default, obviously. So I wanted the student to be able to type pseudocode, and because that's what we're actually going to be learning in the course. So I needed that, and also I wanted the ability to also include like HTML and stuff like that, which I figured out how to do with Jupyter Notebook. So anyway, so let me show you how I got it to work. This is an example of one of my topics. And as you see, we got some mathematical formulas here. We have some HTML, linked to embedded, video YouTubes, and there's spreadsheets, and some tables. We also got some beginner sort of style code, and this is actually written in pseudocode. As you can see, there's output space instead of being print. So and the output is here. So you can actually, so the student can see what the code is written in the pseudocode and the output it produces, which is really great. So how do I do that? Well, there's something called a kernel in Jupyter. So I go to File, New Notebook. I'm making a new one, fresh. And the kernel I'm picking here is the one I wrote. It's called this one, pseudocode Python. And I now have a notebook where I can now type up almost, and it will output what the desired result. So this is a pretty cool way of being able to mod it. So I've also got what's called a magic, and basically because it's transpiling the pseudocode to Python and then running it, executing the Python. You might need to see the actual code that's been changed, the pseudocode, what code has been changed into from pseudocode into Python. Like you actually kind of see what's going on. And I think this is a good learning tool to learn Python. You know, if once they've learned pseudocode, they eventually can change that over to Python. And so using this kind of magic, that's a notebook, the Jupyter notebook term, magic. This magic just means I'm using a special code to tell it to do something extra special. So without that magic, it just prints out normally. With it, I can actually get the syntax coloring even. So it's a pretty cool way of doing that. So that's implemented with a kernel. I had to write that, figure that out, and it was worth it because I think this is just a really great way of working with students and sharing code. Not only that, but as you've seen before with this one here, like this is actually a GitHub. So I can publish it on GitHub. I can publish the end result on GitHub, and they can get a read-only version. Now, my intention, though, is obviously to give them this, to use this so they can actually edit it and play around. And so basically, that's the idea. Hope you enjoyed.